Have you ever noticed that the strongest men in the room rarely waste time explaining themselves? When they make a decision, they don't hold a press conference. They don't beg for understanding. They don't write paragraphs trying to convince everyone they're right. And strangely, the less they explain, the more respect they receive. Most men believe respect comes from making others understand them. But in reality, endless explanations often signal uncertainty, weakness, and a need for validation. The moment you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, something changes. You become harder to manipulate, harder to control, and impossible to guilt into becoming someone you're not. Today, we're going to explore the silent power that emerges when a man learns to stand firmly behind his choices without feeling obligated to justify every move. There's a man, maybe it's you, who can't send a simple no without writing 3 paragraphs underneath it. He can't make a decision without announcing it first. Can't set a boundary without apologizing for it. Can't walk away from something without explaining exactly why he's leaving. And the worst part, he doesn't even realize he's doing it. Most men think they over-explain because they're good communicators, because they're thorough, because they care. That's not what it is. Over-explaining is an addiction, and the drug is approval. Every time you break down your reasoning to someone who didn't ask for it, you're not informing them. You're asking them something. You're asking, does this make sense? Is this okay? Are we still good? You're handing someone else the pen and letting them write the verdict on your choices. And just like any addiction, it gives you temporary relief the moment they nod, agree, or say, I get it, followed by the same hollow feeling. Because their approval didn't actually change anything. You're still the man who needed it. Here's what drives a lot of it, the terror of being seen wrong. Men who over-explain are haunted by a specific nightmare that someone, somewhere, will form the wrong opinion of them and never be corrected. So they preemptively defend themselves. They add context that wasn't requested. They over-clarify decisions that were already made, all in an attempt to control how they're perceived. But here's the painful truth. You cannot explain your way into someone's respect. The more you justify yourself, the more you signal that you don't fully trust your own judgment. And people feel that. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it. Ironically, the man who over-explains to avoid being misunderstood is often the one who gets misread the most, because what people see isn't his reasoning. It's his need. This didn't start last year. It started in a living room, at a dinner table, in a classroom, somewhere a young boy learned that his choices needed to be justified to be valid. Maybe he had a parent who demanded explanations before granting permission. Maybe he grew up in an environment where silence was dangerous and words were armor. Maybe he learned early that if he could explain himself well enough, he could avoid conflict, avoid punishment, avoid disappointment. So he got very, in the last chapter, we established that most explanations aren't communication, they're requests for permission. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. All that explaining you've been doing, all that context, all that justification, all that careful reasoning you've been laying out for people, it hasn't been building your credibility. It's been quietly destroying it. There's a paradox at the heart of how respect actually works, and most men never figure it out. The more you explain yourself, the less people believe you. Not because your reasoning is flawed, not because you're wrong, but because the act of over-explaining sends a signal that bypasses logic entirely and goes straight to instinct. And the signal it sends is this: I'm not sure I'm allowed to do this. Think about the last time someone canceled plans with you. If they sent you a 2-paragraph message detailing every reason why, the work pressure, the exhaustion, the prior commitment they forgot, what did you actually feel? Probably not respect. Probably something closer to discomfort. A subtle sense that something was off. Now think about someone who simply said, I can't make it. Let's reschedule. Same outcome. Completely different energy. One man was asking for your forgiveness. The other assumed he didn't need it. That's the paradox. Saying less felt like more. Watch how people who are genuinely respected communicate. Judges don't explain their verdicts to the courtroom before delivering them. Surgeons don't justify their approach to the patient mid-operation. The CEO doesn't poll the room before making a call. It's not that these people are arrogant. It's that they have a specific relationship with their own authority. They've internalized it. And because they've internalized it, they don't need external confirmation that it's real. They speak in conclusions, not arguments. They say, here's the decision. Not, here's everything I considered and why I think, if you look at it from this angle, the decision makes sense, and I hope you can see where I'm coming from. The difference isn't just style. It's a fundamentally different belief about whether your judgment requires someone else's endorsement. I respect men have decided it doesn't. Here's something behavioral psychology has confirmed over and over. Humans are wired to follow certainty, not correctness, certainty. In uncertain situations, people don't gravitate toward the person with the most information. They gravitate toward the person who seems most sure. This is why a confident wrong answer often gets followed more than a hesitant right one. This isn't stupidity. It's survival wiring. For most of human history, hesitation was dangerous. Certainty meant someone had seen this before, someone knew the way, someone could be trusted to lead. That wiring hasn't changed. When you over-explain, you are performing uncertainty in real time. You are showing your doubt before anyone even asked for it. And the people around you, consciously or not, register that and recalibrate how much weight to give your words. Certainty doesn't mean having all the answers. It means being settled in yourself while you work through what you don't know. It's an internal posture, not a performance. And it requires far fewer words than most men are willing to believe. Real confidence is quiet, not because it's hiding, but because it has nothing to prove. A man who knows his worth doesn't need the room to confirm it. A man who trusts his decisions doesn't need to walk you through every step of how he got there. A man who is settled in his identity doesn't crumble when someone raises an eyebrow. Words for him are tools, not shields. He speaks when something needs to be said. He's silent when it doesn't. And that silence isn't awkward or aggressive. It's grounded. It has weight. There's a reason we describe certain men as having presence. It's not about how much they say. It's about the quality of stillness they carry when they're not saying anything. That stillness communicates something no explanation ever could. I don't need your permission to be who I am. The respect paradox is simple once you see it. Chasing respect through over-explanation is like trying to hold water with an open fist. The harder you squeeze, the faster it escapes. Respect isn't given to the man who proves himself the hardest. It's given to the man who seems to need it least. In the next chapter, we'll look at what it actually looks like to stop the practical, often uncomfortable process of breaking the habit of over-explaining and learning to let your decisions speak for themselves. We've talked about the paradox. We've looked at the psychology. Now I want to tell you a story, not a theory, not a framework. A story because some truths don't fit in bullet points. They have to be lived through a character before they can land in your chest the way they're supposed to. This is the story of a man who had everything, except the one thing that would have made all of it feel real. His name was Max, 37 years old, smart, hardworking, the kind of man people described as solid, dependable, reasonable, always willing to listen. On paper, Max had built a good life, a career he'd worked hard for, a circle of friends who respected him, a reputation as someone you could count on. But there was something no one saw. Every decision Max made, every single one, came packaged with an explanation, a justification, a carefully constructed case for why he had done what he did or was about to do what he was about to do. He changed jobs and spent weeks explaining to everyone why the old one wasn't working and why the new one made sense. He ended a relationship and sent a message so long it looked like a legal document, itemizing every reason, preemptively defending himself against objections that hadn't even been raised. He started going to the gym and felt compelled to explain to his friends that it wasn't about vanity. It was about his health, and he knew it might change his schedule, and he hoped that wasn't going to be a problem. Every choice, every move, every boundary, wrapped in explanation, padded with justification, delivered with the silent, desperate hope that whoever received it would look back at him and say, "Yes, Max, that makes sense." You're allowed. One evening, Max was at dinner with a group of friends. He'd recently made a significant decision. He was leaving the city, moving somewhere quieter, slower. He'd thought about it for over a year. He'd weighed it carefully. He was sure. But when he announced it at the table, he did what he always did. He explained. He talked about the cost of living, the burnout, the noise, the need for space. He laid out the entire architecture of his reasoning, waiting, as he always waited, for the room to validate it. And then one of his friends, a woman named Claire, someone who had always been direct with him, put her fork down and looked at him with something that wasn't quite sympathy and wasn't quite frustration. It was clarity. She said, "Max, why are you asking us if you're allowed to go?" The table went quiet. Max opened his mouth, and for the first time and as long as he could remember, nothing came out. Because she was right. That's exactly what he had been doing. Not announcing, not sharing, asking, every single time. He had been standing in front of people his entire life, holding up his choices like a student holding up homework, waiting for someone to grade it. Max moved. He didn't send a follow-up message explaining the decision again. He didn't post about it online with a caption full of reasons. He didn't call people individually to make sure they understood. He just went. And something strange happened in the silence where his explanations used to be. People respected him more, not because he had become cold, not because he had become arrogant or distant, but because something in his posture had shifted. He had stopped auditioning. He had stopped presenting his life for approval and simply started living it. The friends who mattered stayed close. Some people drifted, and he noticed he wasn't afraid of that anymore, because he understood, maybe for the first time, that the people who had only stayed because he kept explaining himself to them hadn't really been with him to begin with. They had been with a version of him that made them comfortable, the version that kept asking for permission. That version was gone. There was an old idea, simple enough to fit on a single line. A lion doesn't explain why he hunts. Not because the lion is cruel, not because the lion doesn't think, but because the lion has no internal question about whether it is allowed to be what it is. The lion doesn't look to the gazelle for permission, doesn't look to the other animals, doesn't construct a case for its own nature and present it to the jungle for review. It simply is what it is and moves accordingly. Most men have been conditioned to live like something other than lions, to shrink their decisions down to a size that others can approve, to preemptively defend choices that never required a defense, to explain themselves into smallness. Max's transformation wasn't about becoming ruthless. It wasn't about caring nothing for the people around him. It was about finally understanding the difference between sharing and seeking, between communication and confession, between walking into a room and walking into a courtroom. He stopped putting himself on trial. And the moment he did, the moment he stopped needing the verdict, something settled in him that no amount of approval had ever been able to provide. He became, quietly, immovably, his own authority. The sheep will always have opinions about the lion. They'll question his choices, misread his silence, call his stillness arrogance, wonder why he doesn't explain himself. And the lion will continue, unhurried and unbothered, doing exactly what he was built to do. The question isn't whether people will misunderstand you when you stop over-explaining. They will. The question is whether their misunderstanding has the power to stop you. In the next chapter, we'll get practical. The exact moments men are most tempted to over-explain and what to do instead. The lion and the sheep was a metaphor, but this chapter is about something more dangerous than sheep. This chapter is about the people who aren't just indifferent to your explanations, they're waiting for them. People who have learned through instinct or through practice that a man who over-explains is a man who can be controlled. This isn't abstract. This is happening in relationships, workplaces, families, and friendships right now, to men who have no idea it's occurring. Here's something most people never teach you about manipulation. Manipulators don't need force. They don't need to overpower you. All they need is information, and a man who over-explains hands it over voluntarily, enthusiastically, and in extraordinary detail. Every time you explain yourself to a manipulator, you are conducting an intelligence briefing on your own psychology. You tell them what you value, so they know what to threaten. You tell them what you fear, so they know what to weaponize. You tell them where your guilt lies, so they know exactly where to press. The over-explaining man walks into every interaction carrying a map of his own vulnerabilities, and he hands that map to whoever is standing in front of him, including the people who will use it against him. Toxic people don't announce themselves. They don't arrive wearing a sign. They arrive looking like someone who just wants to understand, someone who seems frustrated or hurt or confused, someone who just needs you to explain yourself a little more clearly. And so you do. Again and again and again. There is a specific dynamic that men who over-explain fall into repeatedly, and once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere. It's called the endless debate trap. It works like this. You make a decision. You explain it. The manipulator raises an objection. You address the objection because you're reasonable, because you care, because you want them to understand. They raise another objection. You address that one too. They question your motives. You defend your motives. They reframe the original issue. You re-explain from the new angle. They go quiet and then bring the whole thing up again 3 days later, as if the conversation never happened. There is no destination in this debate. There is no finish line where they finally say, "You know what? That explanation was thorough enough. I accept it," because that was never the point. The debate itself is the point. Keeping you engaged, defending, justifying, that is the point. Because a man who is busy defending himself is not a man who is moving forward. He's stuck, right where the manipulator needs him. The endless debate trap only works on one type of man, the man who believes that if he explains himself clearly enough, the other person will eventually come around. They won't. That's not what they're there for. Now let's talk about something darker. Gaslighting, at its core, is the act of making someone question their own reality. And over-explaining feeds it perfectly. Here's why. When you over-explain, you reveal not just your reasoning, but your uncertainty. You show the cracks. You expose the moments where you second-guessed yourself, where you wavered, where you weren't completely sure. And a skilled manipulator will take those cracks and widen them. They'll take the one moment of doubt you mentioned in passing and turn it into the centerpiece of the argument. They'll reframe your entire explanation back to you, slightly distorted, until you're no longer sure what you actually said or meant or intended. You walk into the conversation knowing exactly what you decided and why. You walk out wondering if you're the problem. That's not an accident. That's a process. And your over-explaining is what made it possible. Every qualifier you add, "I think," "I felt like," "maybe," "I could be wrong," but is a foothold for a manipulator to climb. Every moment of self-doubt you verbalize out loud becomes a lever they can use later. The man who says little gives them nothing to work with. The man who explains everything hands them the entire toolbox. This is the part that stings. You explain yourself because you want peace, because you want resolution, because you genuinely believe that if the other person just understood, really understood, things would be okay. But in the hands of a manipulator, your explanation doesn't create peace. It creates a record. Every reason you gave becomes something that can be used against you. Every admission becomes evidence. Every attempt to show your good faith becomes proof in their retelling of something else entirely. You said you left the job because of stress. Later, they tell people you couldn't handle pressure. You said you needed space in the relationship. Later, they tell people you were emotionally unavailable. You explained your decision with honesty and vulnerability, and they filed it away, reframed it, and deployed it at the moment it would do the most damage. This is why silence is not rudeness. This is why "I don't owe you an explanation" is not arrogance. It is protection. It is the quiet recognition that not everyone who asks for your reasoning deserves access to it. That transparency in the wrong hands is not a virtue, it's a liability. You'll know you're in this pattern when explaining yourself starts to feel like a debt you can never finish paying. When no answer is ever enough. When you find yourself rehearsing justifications before conversations that haven't even happened yet. When you feel exhausted, not from the decision itself, but from the endless labor of defending it. The exit from this dynamic is not a better explanation. There is no combination of words that will satisfy someone whose goal is not understanding, but control. The exit is silence, not hostile silence, not dramatic silence, just a calm, grounded decision to stop submitting your choices for review by people who were never qualified to judge them. One sentence, delivered without apology, repeated without elaboration. This is my decision. That's it. No footnotes, no supporting evidence, no preemptive defense against objections that haven't been raised. Just a man standing behind his choices, unmoved, unbothered, and completely unavailable for a debate he never agreed to enter. Manipulators love men who over-explain because those men do all the work for them. They don't have to dig for your weaknesses, you present them. They don't have to find leverage, you build it and hand it over. They don't have to keep you stuck, your own need to be understood is that perfectly. The moment you stop explaining, the dynamic collapses. Not because you've become cold or closed, but because you've become unmanageable. And there is nothing a manipulator fears more than a man they cannot move. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into what it actually feels like on the inside to stop. The discomfort, the guilt, the silence, and why every bit of it is worth it. The last chapter was about protection, recognizing the people who weaponize your words and learning to withhold what they have no right to receive. But this chapter is about something bigger than protection. This chapter is about construction. Because once you stop spending your energy explaining yourself, a question emerges, and it's an important one. What do you do with the silence? The Stoics answered that question 2,000 years ago, and their answer is as precise and as relevant today as it was in ancient Rome. Stoicism was not a philosophy of detachment. It was not about becoming cold or numb or indifferent to the world. It was a philosophy of mastery, specifically mastery over the one territory every man actually has jurisdiction over, himself. The Stoics made a radical distinction that most men still haven't fully absorbed. They divided all of existence into two categories, things within your control and things outside of it. Within your control, your thoughts, your choices, your actions, your character. Outside your control, other people's opinions, their reactions, their approval, their understanding of you. And here is where the Stoic secret lives, quietly, waiting for the man ready to receive it. You were never supposed to be managing what people think of you. You were supposed to be building who you are. Every hour you spend crafting explanations designed to shape someone else's perception of you is an hour stolen from the only project that was ever truly yours. The project of becoming a man whose actions require no commentary. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the known world. Emperor of Rome, commander of armies, ruler of millions, a man whose word carried the weight of civilization itself. And yet he spent his private hours writing to himself about the temptation to seek praise, about the discipline required to act rightly without needing anyone to notice, about the quiet war every man fights between doing what is good and doing what will be applauded. In his private journal, what we now call Meditations, he returned to this theme again and again with the focus of a man who knew exactly how seductive approval could be, even at the top of the world. He wrote about men who perform virtue rather than practice it, who do the right thing loudly so the right people will see, who confuse reputation with character and spend their lives polishing the surface while the interior quietly collapses. Marcus understood something that most men in positions far less powerful than he's never grasped. Approval is a moving target. Character is a fixed point. You can spend your entire life chasing what people think of you, adjusting, explaining, performing, and die, having never actually arrived anywhere. Or you can fix your attention on who you are becoming, act from that place consistently, and let the reputation follow as it will. One path is exhausting and endless. The other is demanding, but it goes somewhere. Here is a truth so simple it almost sounds naive, until you think about how rarely men actually live by it. You don't build a reputation by telling people who you are. You build it by showing them, repeatedly, over time, without announcement. The man who keeps his word without making speeches about integrity. The man who shows up when it's hard without posting about sacrifice. The man who makes the difficult decision quietly, without calling a meeting to discuss how difficult it was. These men don't have loud reputations. They have deep ones. The kind that doesn't require maintenance. The kind that other people carry for you. Not because you asked them to, but because they witnessed something real and it stayed with them. That kind of reputation cannot be explained into existence. It can only be lived into existence. And it is completely immune to the one thing that terrifies the over-explicable most. The possibility that people won't understand. Because when your behavior is consistent enough over a long enough period of time, there is nothing left to misunderstand. The picture becomes undeniable. Not because you narrated it, but because you painted it day after day in full view of everyone paying attention. There is a particular kind of power that only becomes visible over time. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't send updates or ask for feedback or pause to check whether it's being appreciated. It simply continues. Silent consistency is the most underrated force in a man's life. Not the grand gesture, but the quiet, unbroken pattern of doing what you said you would do, being who you said you were, showing up in the same way regardless of who is watching or whether anyone is keeping score. This is what the Stoics were pointing at when they talked about living according to nature, living in alignment with your own deepest values, not as a performance for an audience, but as the simple, daily expression of who you have decided to be. A river doesn't explain its direction. It doesn't justify why it flows the way it flows. It doesn't pause at every bend to make sure the landscape understands. It moves, consistently, powerfully, carving its path not through argument, but through the patient, relentless application of its nature. That is what silent consistency looks like in a man. Not the loudest voice in the room, but the most reliable presence. The one whose pattern becomes so clear, so steady, so undeniable, that his character becomes its own explanation. And this brings us to the key idea that sits at the heart of this entire chapter. Character is the explanation. Not your words, not your justifications, not the carefully constructed case you present to the room before making a move. Your character. The way you treat people when there's nothing to gain. The promises you keep when no one would know if you broke them. The standards you hold yourself to in private, when the audience has gone home and it's just you and the mirror. That is your explanation. The only one that matters. The only one that lasts. Men who live this way don't need to announce their values because their values are visible in everything they do. They don't need to defend their decisions because their track record speaks before they open their mouth. They don't need your approval because they have something far more stable than approval. They have integrity, the private, unshakable knowledge that who they are on the outside matches who they are on the inside. No explanation required. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth and still had to remind himself, in private, not to chase applause. If the pressure to seek approval could reach a man like that, it can reach any of us. The Stoic answer was never to pretend the pressure doesn't exist. It was to redirect the energy, to take everything you were spending on managing perception and invest it, instead, in building character. Because at the end of a man's life, the question won't be, did people understand me? It will be, did I live in a way that was worth understanding? Let your actions answer that, quietly, consistently, without apology. In the next chapter, we'll look at the practical language of the man who has stopped explaining what he says, how he says it, and the specific phrases that hold the line without starting a war. The last chapter gave you the foundation, character over approval, action over explanation, the long, quiet game of becoming a man whose behavior speaks for itself. But foundations get tested. And the test comes in a very specific, very human moment. The moment someone looks at you with expectation in their eyes, and you have to tell them something they don't want to hear. That moment has a feeling. Most men know it instantly. A tightening in the chest. A pull toward softening the answer. A sudden, powerful urge to explain, to cushion, to overqualify, anything to delay or dilute the discomfort of being the reason someone is disappointed. This chapter is about that feeling, where it comes from, why it has so much power over so many men, and how to walk through it without losing yourself on the other side. Let's be honest about something most self-help content glosses over. Saying no does feel uncomfortable. Not just for weak men or wounded men. For most men, at most levels of development in most relationships that actually matter to them, the discomfort is not a character flaw. It's not evidence that you're broken or insufficiently stoic. It's evidence that you're human, that you have people in your life you genuinely care about, and that their emotional state registers with you. The problem is not the feeling. The problem is what most men do with the feeling. They let it make decisions. They say yes when they mean no. They agree to things they resent. They shrink boundaries before they've even been spoken. They bury the truth inside so many qualifications and apologies that by the time it arrives, it no longer resembles a decision, it resembles a plea. And then they wonder why they feel resentful, why they feel invisible, why every relationship slowly accumulates a quiet, unnamed tension that no one can quite locate. The tension has a location. It lives exactly where the unexpressed no used to be. Here's the part no one warns you about. Setting a boundary doesn't feel like freedom, not at first. At first, it feels like guilt. You say no, and the other person goes, quiet, and something in you immediately starts working, rehearsing, second-guessing, wondering if you were too harsh, too cold, too selfish, scanning their face for damage, preparing the explanation that will soften the blow you've already delivered. That guilt is not your conscience talking. Your conscience would speak up before a genuinely wrong action, not after a legitimate boundary. What you're feeling is conditioning. It's the accumulated weight of every time you were made to feel responsible for someone else's emotional comfort. Every time a parent's disappointment was handed to you as if it were your fault. Every time the atmosphere of a room changed because of a choice you made, and you learned, quietly and completely, that other people's feelings were somehow your jurisdiction. That learning was wrong, but it went deep. And it doesn't dissolve the moment you intellectually understand it's wrong. It dissolves through repetition, through setting the boundary, feeling the guilt, and not collapsing under it. Through staying in the discomfort long enough to discover that it passes, that the world doesn't end, that the relationship, if it's real, survives. Every time you hold the line and live through the guilt without letting it reverse your decision, you weaken its grip slightly. Do it enough times and something shifts. The guilt still shows up, but it no longer has the same authority. You can feel it and keep walking. This is the truth that changes everything, once a man is really ready to receive it. You cannot live a full life without disappointing people. Not some people. Not difficult people. Not unreasonable people. People you love. People who matter to you. People who are decent and fair and who will still, inevitably, want something from you that you cannot or should not give. The man who has decided he will never disappoint anyone has not made a noble commitment. He has made an impossible one, and the cost of attempting to keep it as his own life, his time, his energy, his boundaries, his voice, his direction. He will spend himself completely in the service of other people's comfort, and arrive at the end of his life having carefully avoided disappointing everyone except the one person whose disappointment mattered most, himself. Disappointment is not a sign that something went wrong. It is a sign that two people have different needs, and that one of them this time was honest about it. It is the natural, inevitable friction of lives that are genuinely being lived rather than quietly managed. The question is never, how do I avoid disappointing people? The question is, whose disappointment am I willing to carry? And whose expectations am I willing to release? The freedom that most men are looking for, the lightness, the groundedness, the sense of finally being able to breathe, doesn't come from finding the perfect words to soften every no. It comes from accepting a simple, unchangeable fact. Other people's emotional reactions belong to them, not to you. Not your responsibility to prevent, manage, or fix. Not a verdict on your character. Not evidence that you did something wrong. When you tell the truth and someone is disappointed, that disappointment is real and it deserves compassion. But it is not yours to carry. When you set a boundary and someone is angry, that anger is valid and it deserves acknowledgement. But it is not yours to dissolve. When you make a decision and someone doesn't understand, Their confusion is genuine, and it deserves respect. But it is not yours to resolve through an explanation that dismantles the boundary you just built. This is what freedom actually looks like. Not the absence of other people's reactions, but the absence of the obligation to fix them. A man who has accepted this walks differently. He speaks differently. He makes decisions differently. Not because he cares less about people, but because he has finally, clearly drawn the line between empathy and responsibility. He can feel for you without being controlled by what you feel. He can care about your experience without making it the condition of his choices. He can disappoint you and still look you in the eye. There is a version of this that gets very practical. Someone asks you for something you cannot give. A favor, your time, your agreement, your presence somewhere you don't want to be. The old response is a performance, a long, careful construction of reasons designed to make the no feel like something other than a no, to preemptively absorb their disappointment before it lands, to ensure they leave the conversation still thinking well of you. The new response is simpler, quieter, and infinitely harder until it becomes natural. I can't do that. No footnotes, no apology tour, no detailed breakdown of why offered before they've even reacted. Just a man standing in his answer, making room for whatever comes next, without rushing to fill that room with justification. If they ask why, you can choose to share briefly, or you can simply say, "It's not something I'm able to commit to right now." And then you stop. You let the silence exist. You let them have their reaction. You resist the pull to rescue them from it. That resistance, that quiet, deliberate withholding of the explanation that would make everything easier in the short term. That is where the real work is. And every time you do it, you become slightly more free. You are not a mirror whose purpose is to reflect back whatever people need to see. You are not a thermostat whose job is to regulate everyone else's emotional temperature. You are a man with a life, a direction, a set of values, and a finite amount of time, and none of that can be fully expressed if it's constantly being filtered through the question of whether it will disappoint someone. People will be disappointed. That is certain. The only real choice is whether their disappointment will be the thing that runs your life, or simply one of the natural, unavoidable sounds of a life being lived honestly. You are not responsible for everyone's emotional reaction. You are responsible for your own integrity. Protect it accordingly. In the next chapter, we bring everything together, what the man who has mastered this actually looks like, how he moves through the world, and the quiet, lasting power he carries in every room he enters. In the last chapter, we talked about releasing the obligation to manage other people's emotional reactions. That release creates something, space. And most men, conditioned to fill every gap with words, every silence with explanation, every pause with justification, don't know what to do with that space. They panic. They talk. They overshare. They hand out pieces of themselves like flyers on a street corner to anyone willing to take one. This chapter is about what happens when you stop doing that, when you let the space exist, when you discover that silence isn't emptiness, it's architecture. And the man who knows how to use it is building something. Most men never have mystery, gravity, strength. Human beings are pattern-seeking creatures. We are wired at a deep biological level to try to understand what's in front of us, to categorize, to predict, to figure out. It's a survival mechanism. The unknown has always carried risk, and the brain treats unresolved questions as open loops that demand closure. Here's what that means in practice. When a man reveals everything, his fears, his plans, his reasoning, his doubts, his entire inner world laid out for inspection, he closes all those loops immediately. There's nothing left to wonder about, nothing unresolved, nothing pulling at the attention. He becomes psychologically known. And what is fully known is rarely deeply respected. It is simply categorized, filed away, taken for granted. The man who reveals selectively is a different experience entirely. He speaks, and people lean in because they sense there is more beneath the surface than what's being offered. He makes a decision, and people wonder about the thinking behind it because he didn't hand it to them. He moves through a room, and people watch because they cannot quite get a complete read on him. That incompleteness is not accidental. It is not aloofness or performance. It is the natural byproduct of a man who understands that not everything needs to be shared and who has the discipline to honor that understanding. Mystery is not deception. It is discretion. And discretion, in a world where everyone is broadcasting everything constantly, has become one of the rarest and most magnetic qualities a man can possess. There is a well-documented phenomenon in social psychology, one that shows up in boardrooms, courtrooms, relationships, and every social hierarchy humans have ever constructed. Silence reads as power. Not always, not in every context, but consistently enough that the pattern is undeniable. When two people are in conversation and one of them is comfortable with silence, truly comfortable, not performing comfort, but genuinely at ease in the pause, that person is almost universally perceived as the one with more authority. Why? Because discomfort with silence is a form of neediness. It says, I require this interaction to keep moving. I need the stimulation, the validation, the reassurance that things are okay between us. It hands control of the dynamic to whoever is willing to wait longest. The man who can sit in silence without reaching for words to fill it is signaling something profound, that he is not dependent on the interaction for his sense of self, that he is complete before the conversation begins and will be complete after it ends. That signal lands. People feel it even when they can't articulate it, and they respond to it with the one thing every man who over-explains has been desperately chasing through words: respect. Not because the silent man is withholding information strategically, though sometimes he is, but because his silence itself communicates a quality that no explanation ever could: self-containment. He doesn't need you to complete him, and there is nothing more powerful than that. Study the communication patterns of genuinely powerful leaders, not the performative ones, not the loud ones, but the ones whose authority is real and whose influence endures, and you will find silence, used with the precision of a master craftsman. They pause before answering, not because they don't know what to say, but because they understand that the pause itself carries weight. It signals that what follows has been considered, not reactive, not desperate, not designed to fill space. They ask questions instead of making statements. They gather information rather than broadcasting it. They listen in a way that makes the other person feel fully heard, while revealing almost nothing about their own position until the moment they choose to. They don't fill every meeting with their own voice. They speak less than the people around them, and when they do speak, the room shifts. Not because what they say is always more intelligent than what others have said, but because the relative rarity of their words has given each one more weight. This is strategic silence. Not the silence of a man with nothing to say, but the silence of a man who understands that timing and scarcity give words their power. A currency spent freely loses value. A word offered rarely becomes precious. The leader who speaks constantly teaches people to tune him out. The leader who speaks selectively teaches people to lean in. Now let's talk about the risk, because there is a real one, and most men stumble into it without ever seeing it coming. When you reveal everything, you don't just lose mystery. You lose leverage over how you are perceived, over how conversations unfold, over the narrative that surrounds your decisions and your life. Think about what happens when you share your plans before they are complete. People offer opinions. Doubts get planted. Energy that should have gone into execution gets redirected into defending the idea to people who have no stake in its success. You arrive at the starting line already tired, not from the work, but from the explaining. Think about what happens when you share your fears openly, indiscriminately, with people who haven't earned that level of access. Some will offer genuine support. Others will file the information away, and in a future moment of conflict or competition, they will know exactly where to press. Think about what happens when you reveal your reasoning in full before a negotiation, a decision, a difficult conversation. You hand the other party a complete picture of your position, including your doubts, your limits, your flexibility. You have just negotiated against yourself before the conversation even begins. What people don't know, they cannot use. This is not paranoia. This is not the counsel of a man who trusts no one. It is simply the recognition that information has value, and that value diminishes the moment it is given away freely to everyone without consideration of who is receiving it or what they will do with it. The man who reveals everything thinks he is being authentic. Often he is being unwise. Authenticity is not the obligation to share everything with everyone. It is the commitment to be genuine in what you choose to share with the people who have earned it in the moments that call for it. Everything else can remain exactly where it is most powerful, inside you, unspoken, working. So what does this look like practically for a man who has spent years filling every silence, explaining every decision, broadcasting every thought? It starts with a single discipline, the pause. Before you respond, pause. Not dramatically, not as a power move, just long enough to ask yourself, does this require an answer? Does this require my full answer? Does this person need this information, or am I offering it out of habit, out of anxiety, out of the old need to be understood? Most of the time, you'll find that less is enough. A question asked to provoke you doesn't require a full response. It requires a measured one. A decision challenged by someone who has no authority over it doesn't require a defense. It requires acknowledgement and nothing more. A conversation designed to extract your reasoning doesn't require your cooperation. It requires your discretion. The architecture of silence is built one pause at a time, one withheld over-explanation at a time, one moment of sitting comfortably in the space where your justification used to live. And over time, that architecture becomes something people can feel when they're around you, a quality of depth, of groundedness, of quiet confidence that has no need to announce itself, because it doesn't need to. It's already obvious. In a world that rewards noise, that treats constant sharing as authenticity, over-explanation as thoroughness, and verbal volume as confidence, silence has become a radical act. The man who chooses it deliberately is not retreating. He is not hiding. He is not cold or disconnected or afraid. He is building something, slowly, quietly, without announcement. A reputation that precedes him. A presence that commands attention. A depth that draws people in precisely because it cannot be immediately measured. What people don't know, they can't easily attack. What they can't fully read, they cannot dismiss. And what they cannot dismiss, they respect. In the final chapter, we bring everything together. The man you can become when you stop explaining yourself completely, what he looks like, how he carries himself, and the life that becomes possible when you finally, fully, stop asking the world for permission to exist. 7 chapters ago, we started with a man who couldn't send a simple no without writing 3 paragraphs underneath it. We've traveled a long way since then, through the psychology of approval addiction, through the respect paradox, through the story of Max and the lion, through the dark mechanics of manipulation, through Stoic wisdom, the courage to disappoint, and the quiet architecture of silence. And now we arrive here, the final chapter, the one that isn't about understanding the problem anymore, because you understand it. This chapter is about the moment, the specific, personal, irreversible moment when everything you've absorbed stops being information and becomes transformation, because that moment is coming for you. Or perhaps, if you've been honest with yourself through every chapter of this, it's already here. Transformation rarely looks the way we imagine it will. We picture a dramatic turning point, a single conversation, a moment of clarity so blinding it reorganizes everything instantly. A before and after, clean and obvious, with a clear line between them. Real transformation is quieter than that, and far more specific. It looks like Marcus, 42 years old, senior manager at a company he'd given 12 years of his life to. A man who had spent his entire career over-explaining every decision upward, sideways, and downward. Pre-justifying proposals. Apologizing for recommendations before anyone had questioned them. Arriving at every meeting having already argued against himself so thoroughly that by the time he spoke, he sounded uncertain about ideas he'd spent weeks developing. His moment came in a boardroom. A proposal he'd prepared, genuinely strong, carefully researched, was challenged immediately by a colleague who hadn't read the brief. The old Marcus would have pivoted instantly into explanation mode, would have rebuilt the entire case from scratch, live under pressure, with the desperation of a man who needed the room to agree. Instead, he paused, looked at his colleague calmly, and said, "The data is in the brief. I'm confident in the recommendation." And then he stopped. The silence that followed lasted perhaps 4 seconds. It felt to Marcus like 4 minutes. But the room shifted. Not dramatically, not with applause, just shifted. The challenge didn't gain traction. The conversation moved forward. And afterward, his director pulled him aside and said something no one had ever said to him in 12 years. "You carried that room today." He hadn't done it with more words. He had done it with fewer. Then there was James, 29, fresh out of a relationship that had slowly dismantled his sense of self. A relationship where every feeling he expressed had been questioned. Every boundary he attempted had been debated. Every decision he made had been submitted to a process of negotiation that never ended. James had learned inside that relationship to pre-explain everything, to front-load every statement with disclaimers, to qualify his own emotions before expressing them in case they weren't received correctly. His moment came 6 months after the relationship ended. A new friendship, a dinner invitation he genuinely didn't want to accept, and the words that came out of his mouth almost before he decided to say them. "I'm going to sit this one out." No reason given, no apology attached, no careful explanation of his energy levels or his introverted tendencies or his complicated feelings about social situations post-breakup. Just a clean, simple, complete sentence. He told me later that he sat in his car for 5 minutes afterward, not in doubt, but in something he hadn't felt in years, relief, the physical, cellular relief of a man who had just, for the first time in a very long time, trusted himself enough to stop explaining. Your moment will be your own. Different circumstances, different relationship, different room, but the feeling will be recognizable because every man who has lived it describes the same thing. First, the pull, that familiar gravitational force toward the explanation, the habit reaching for its usual tools, the voice that says, "Just add a sentence, just clarify, just make sure they understand." Then the choice, the moment you recognize the pull for what it is and decide quietly not to follow it. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of the new, growing understanding that your decision is complete without their endorsement. Then the silence, the space where your explanation used to live. Uncomfortable at first, unfamiliar, slightly disorienting, the way any newly vacated habit space feels. And then something else, something underneath the discomfort that you might not recognize immediately because you've been covering it with words for so long. Steadiness, a quiet internal steadiness that doesn't depend on how they respond, that doesn't rise or fall based on whether they nod or frown or push back, that simply holds. That is the first brick of self-respect being laid in real time, not the self-respect you read about, the kind you build with your own hands, in your own life, in the specific moment when it costs you something. Confidence is not a feeling that arrives before the action. It is a feeling that grows from the action, specifically from the repeated experience of doing the hard thing and surviving it. Every time you hold a boundary without padding it in explanation, your nervous system learns something. It learns that the discomfort is survivable, that the disapproval doesn't destroy you, that the silence on the other end of your unexplained no is not the catastrophe it always felt like it would be. And slowly, not overnight, not in a single moment of revelation, but slowly and unmistakably, the equation inside you begins to shift. The cost of over-explaining starts to feel higher than the cost of withholding it. The discomfort of setting a clean boundary starts to feel smaller than the resentment of not setting one. The risk of being misunderstood starts to matter less than the certainty of being untrue to yourself. This is how confidence actually grows, not from affirmations, not from external validation, not from someone finally telling you that you're enough. It grows from the accumulating evidence built from your own actions that you can be trusted. By yourself, with yourself, for yourself. That trust earned through action, proven through repetition, is the foundation of everything. The confidence, the groundedness, the quiet authority that other people feel, when they're in the room with a man who has done this work. It cannot be faked. It cannot be explained into existence. It can only be lived into. There is a line, invisible but absolute, between the man who needs approval and the man who has self-respect. It is not a line drawn in personality or circumstance or natural temperament. It is a line drawn in choice, in the repeated, deliberate, often uncomfortable choice to locate your sense of validity inside yourself rather than in the responses of the people around you. The approval-seeking man wakes up every day and begins, often without realizing it, the work of managing perception, of calibrating himself to the room, of monitoring reactions and adjusting accordingly. His internal weather is determined by external conditions, and on any given day the forecast depends entirely on how people around him are responding. It is an exhausting way to live, not because the people in his life are necessarily difficult, but because he has outsourced the most important jurisdiction to the most unpredictable variable: other people. The man with self-respect has made a different arrangement. He has decided, and the decision required deliberate, repeated recommitment before it became natural, that his sense of who he is does not require external confirmation to remain stable. He can be criticized without collapsing, misunderstood without chasing correction, disagreed with without dismantling his position to find common ground at any cost. He knows who he is. He trusts what he knows. And he moves through the world from that place, not rigidly, not arrogantly, but with a settledness that is immediately perceptible to everyone he encounters. That settledness is self-respect made visible, and it is the direct, inevitable result of the journey this entire video has been about: the slow, brave, deeply personal process of stopping the explanations and discovering what was underneath them all along. A man, whole, complete, requiring nothing from the outside to confirm what he already knows on the inside. I want to paint you a picture of what becomes possible, not as a fantasy, as a direction. On the other side of this work, decisions feel different. They stop being proposals submitted for approval and start being simply choices, made, committed to, lived with. The energy that used to go into constructing justifications goes, instead, into executing. Relationships feel different. The ones built on your willingness to over-explain begin to recalibrate. Some will struggle because they were built on a version of you that no longer exists. Others will deepen because the people in them will finally be meeting the real version, and new ones will form, drawn to a quality in you that wasn't fully visible before. A groundedness, a presence, a man who is fully himself without apology. You feel different, lighter in a specific way, not because your life has fewer challenges, but because you are no longer carrying the additional weight of other people's potential disapproval as a constant, invisible burden. And the voice in your own head, the one that has spent years narrating your justifications, rehearsing your defenses, pre-writing the explanations you might need, begins gradually to quiet. Not because you've silenced it by force, but because it no longer has a job to do. You've stopped asking for permission. There is a version of you that has been waiting patiently, quietly, with remarkable endurance on the other side of the last explanation you needed to give. He doesn't announce himself. He doesn't perform. He doesn't walk into rooms hoping to be understood. He walks in having already understood himself. He speaks when words serve a purpose. He's silent when they don't. He disappoints people sometimes and carries that with compassion, not collapse. He is misunderstood occasionally and releases it because he knows that the right people, paying the right kind of attention, will always see clearly enough. He has stopped arguing his case to a jury that was never qualified to judge it. He has stopped submitting his life for approval to people whose approval was never going to be enough. He has found, in the silence where the justifications used to live, something that no amount of explaining ever provided. Freedom. Not the freedom of having no responsibilities. Not the freedom of caring nothing for others, but the deep, specific, irreplaceable freedom of a man who has finally, fully, stopped asking the world for permission to be himself. That freedom starts exactly where justification ends, and it starts the moment you decide it does. Thank you for watching. If this video moved something in you, share it with the man who needs it. He might not say it changed something, but it will. Everything we've covered so far has been building toward this. The philosophy, the psychology, the stories, the internal shifts. But philosophy without application is just atmosphere. And at some point, a man has to stop nodding at ideas and start using them in real moments, with real people, under real pressure. This chapter is the most practical one in this entire video. 5 specific situations. Situations you have already been in. Situations you will be in again, possibly this week, possibly today. And in each one, the most powerful thing you can do is the same. Stop explaining. You've been here before. You're mid-explanation, laying out your reasoning carefully, making your case with patience and precision, and something in the other person's face tells you, if you're honest enough to read it, that nothing you say is going to move them. Their arms are crossed, not necessarily physically, but energetically. They asked for your explanation the way a prosecutor asks a question they already know the answer to. They aren't gathering information. They are building a case, and because you were trained to believe that the right explanation will always land, that clarity will always create understanding. Keep going, rephrasing, reframing, finding new angles, adding more detail, becoming more thorough, more careful, more desperate with every sentence. Here is the truth that will save you enormous amounts of energy. You cannot explain your way into a mind that is already closed. The decision to misunderstand you was not made because your explanation was insufficient. It was made before you opened your mouth, and no volume of words, however precise, however reasonable, however undeniably correct, will reverse a conclusion someone has already emotionally committed to. The moment you recognize this dynamic, there is only one intelligent response. Stop. Not with frustration, not with a parting shot. Just stop. Cleanly and completely. I've shared my thinking. I'll leave it there. One sentence. No follow-up. No final attempt to land the point you've been trying to land for the last 10 minutes. You are not surrendering. You are not admitting defeat. You are simply refusing to spend yourself on a door that was never going to open. Save the energy. You'll need it for something that actually matters. This one catches men off guard because it feels like the right time to explain. You've set a boundary. Someone has pushed back, and because the boundary is legitimate, because you know it's healthy and necessary and long overdue, you feel compelled to prove it, to build the case for it, to make them understand why it exists so thoroughly that they cannot possibly object. Here's what that looks like in practice. I can't take that call on Sunday because I've decided to keep that time for myself, and I've been struggling with work-life balance for a while now. And my therapist actually mentioned that boundaries around personal time are important, and I just think it's healthier for me overall. And I hope you can understand where I'm coming from. What started as a boundary became a confession, a vulnerability inventory, an open invitation to find the weakest point in your reasoning and press on it. Because here's what happens when you over-explain a boundary. You are no longer holding the boundary. You are negotiating it. And once you're negotiating, you've already begun to lose. A boundary explained in full is a boundary being asked for permission to exist. A boundary stated simply as a boundary that already exists. I'm not available on Sundays. That's it. No backstory. No therapeutic context. No preemptive defense against objections. If they ask why, it's time I keep for myself. If they push further, I understand that's inconvenient. The boundary still stands. The boundary doesn't need their agreement to be real. It needs yours. Every man has at least one in his life. The person who always has a problem with what you're doing, who finds the flaw in every plan, the risk in every decision, the evidence of poor judgment in every choice you make, who frames their criticism as concern or wisdom, or just being honest, but whose feedback, regardless of how it's packaged, always arrives pointing in the same direction. At you, the chronic critic is not looking for understanding. They are not invested in your reasoning. They do not want to be persuaded by your explanation. In fact, your explanation gives them more material to work with. You say you changed careers because you wanted more fulfillment. They question whether you've thought through the financial implications. You address the financial implications. They pivot to whether you're being realistic about your skills. You address your skills. They wonder if you're just running away from difficulty. The goalposts move. They always move because the goal was never to understand you. The goal, conscious or not, is to keep you in a posture of defense, to remain the authority whose approval your decisions require before they can be considered valid. The only winning move in this dynamic is to stop playing, not with hostility, not with a speech about how their criticism isn't welcome, just with the quiet, consistent withdrawal of the thing they need to keep the cycle going. Your explanation. I hear you. 2 words, delivered calmly, followed by nothing. Not I hear you, but not I hear you, and here's why you're wrong. Just I hear you. Acknowledge that they spoke. Refuse to engage with the content. Move on. You are not being dismissive. You are being disciplined. And every time you do it, you shorten the leash the chronic critic has on your energy, until eventually they find that pulling it produces nothing at all. There is a particular kind of over-explanation that is perhaps the most unnecessary of all, and yet some of the most capable men fall into it constantly. It is the explanation that accompanies something that already speaks for itself. You delivered the project on time, under budget, exceeding every benchmark. And then you spend 15 minutes in the meeting explaining your process, your methodology, your decision-making framework, your contingency planning, as if the result wasn't already in the room, as if the work hadn't already made the case, as if the outcome needed a narrator. It doesn't. Results are the most credible form of communication available to a man. They carry no agenda. They cannot be accused of spin. They do not require the audience to trust the speaker because the evidence is standing right there, independent and undeniable. When your actions have already provided the answer, adding words doesn't strengthen the message. It dilutes it. It shifts the room's attention from what you did, which is powerful, to how you feel about what you did, which is vulnerable. It introduces the very uncertainty and need for validation that the result itself had already eliminated. Let the work speak. If it was good, the room already knows. Your explanation of why it was good will only make you sound like a man who isn't sure it was. Present the result. Answer specific questions if they arise. Otherwise, stand behind it in silence and let it do what good work always does. Speak for itself. This is the most important situation on this list, and the hardest to catch because it disguises itself as communication. You tell yourself you're explaining because the other person needs to understand, because clarity matters, because transparency is a value you hold. But if you slow down and get honest, genuinely honest, you'll find that in certain moments, the explanation isn't for them at all. It's for you. You're not informing them. You're asking them through the architecture of your explanation to confirm that you made the right choice, to tell you that your decision makes sense, to give you the thing you haven't yet been able to give yourself, permission. This is the moment the entire video has been building toward, because this is where the work becomes internal. This is where no communication strategy, no matter how precise, can substitute for the real thing. The real thing is this: learning to validate yourself, not in the motivational poster sense, not empty affirmations repeated in a mirror, but the actual grounded practice of making a decision, sitting with it, feeling the discomfort of uncertainty and choosing to trust your own judgment without requiring external confirmation before it counts. When you notice yourself explaining and something feels off, when the words feel more like a question than a statement, when you're watching the other person's face for a specific reaction, when the relief you're looking for isn't clarity, but agreement, stop. Not because the other person can't handle your honesty, but because what you actually need in that moment cannot be found in their response. It can only be found in one place: the decision to trust yourself enough to stop asking. Look at all 5 situations, and you'll find the same truth running through each one like a wire. In every case, the explanation isn't serving communication. It's serving something else: the hope that words can control outcomes, manage perceptions, prevent misunderstanding, secure approval. or postpone the discomfort of standing fully behind a decision without a safety net. And in every case, the most powerful response is the one that requires the most courage, silence, brevity, stillness, not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally understood something that changes everything. Not every question deserves an explanation. Not every challenge requires a defense. Not every raised eyebrow requires a paragraph. Not every moment of silence needs to be filled with the sound of a man justifying his right to exist. Some moments simply require a man who is settled enough in himself to let them pass, undefended, unexplained, and completely intact. You now have 5 clear markers, 5 specific moments you can recognize in real time and respond to differently than you ever have before. Not with more words, not with better arguments, with the quiet, grounded confidence of a man who has finally understood that his decisions do not require a courtroom. His boundaries do not require a brief. His results do not require a narrator. His choices do not require a jury. They require only one thing: a man willing to stand behind them, without explanation. 9 chapters ago, we opened with a man who couldn't send a simple no without writing 3 paragraphs underneath it. We've come a long way together since then. We've looked at the psychology beneath the habit, the manipulation it invites, the respect it silently destroys, the freedom waiting on the other side of it, the specific moments that demand a different response, the philosophy of men who understood centuries before us that character is built in silence, not in explanation. And now we arrive at the final destination. Not a technique, not a strategy, not another framework to apply. A way of being. The man who needs no defense. Most men have been sold a counterfeit version of confidence their entire lives. They were shown loudness and told it was strength. Shown dominance and told it was authority. Shown the man who fills every room with his voice and told that is what power looks like. It isn't. True confidence is almost shockingly quiet. It doesn't announce itself when it walks in. It doesn't need to dominate the conversation to feel secure within it. It doesn't bristle at challenge or collapse under criticism or scramble for words when someone raises an eyebrow. It simply holds, in every kind of weather, in approval and in disapproval, in the rooms where everyone agrees and in the rooms where no one does, in the conversations that go well and the ones that don't. True confidence is not the absence of doubt. It is the presence of a man who has learned to act rightly in spite of it, who no longer requires certainty from the outside because he has cultivated something more reliable on the inside, a relationship with his own judgment that doesn't depend on being validated by others to remain intact. That man doesn't explain himself compulsively, not because he has nothing to say, but because he has nothing to prove. His identity is not a hypothesis he's constantly testing against other people's reactions. It is a settled fact he carries with him, quietly, completely, without the need for anyone else's confirmation. Watch him in a difficult conversation. He listens fully. He speaks deliberately. He doesn't fill the silence with nervous words. He doesn't shift his position based on the emotional temperature of the room. He is, in the most complete sense of the phrase, at home in himself. That is what true confidence looks like. Not performance, not armor. Home. The man who needs no defense is not improvising. He is not navigating life by feel, adjusting to each situation, reading each room, recalibrating his values based on what will be most acceptable to whoever is standing in front of him. He is living from a fixed internal point, a set of principles, chosen deliberately, tested through experience, refined through failure, that function as his compass regardless of the terrain. These principles are not rules imposed from outside. They are not a list of virtues performed for an audience. They are the deeply considered answers to the questions every serious man must eventually ask himself. What do I actually value? Not what I've been told to value, but what I know in my quietest moments to be true and important. What kind of man am I committed to being? Not when it's easy, not when people are watching, but when it costs something. What will I not compromise, regardless of the pressure, regardless of the incentive, regardless of who is asking? A man who has answered these questions and who has done the harder work of living by the answers does not need to explain himself because his behavior is already legible. Not to anyone, not immediately, but to the people paying attention over time, the picture becomes undeniable. He is consistent in a way that cannot be faked, present in a way that cannot be performed, grounded in a way that cannot be manufactured. Because it isn't manufactured, it was built, decision by decision, principle by principle, in the quiet, private moments when no one was watching, and he chose, anyway, to be the man he said he was. Here is the deepest root of over-explanation and the deepest work required to move beyond it, beneath the approval-seeking, beneath the fear of disappointment, beneath the manipulation patterns and the childhood conditioning and the respect paradox. Beneath all of it, there is a man who does not fully trust himself, who has learned somewhere along the way that his instincts are unreliable, that his judgment requires external verification before it can be acted on, that the way he sees things needs to be cross-referenced with someone else's perception before it counts as real. And so he explains, obsessively, exhaustingly, endlessly, not just to inform others but to reassure himself, to build, through other people's agreement, the confidence in his own decisions that he hasn't yet found the way to build alone. The path out of this is not more information. It is not better reasoning. It is not finding someone wise enough to finally validate you in a way that sticks. It is practice. The practice of making a decision, a real one, with real stakes, and committing to it before the approval arrives, before the consensus forms, before the room has weighed in. The practice of sitting in the discomfort of your own unvalidated judgment and discovering, gradually, that it holds. Not always. You will be wrong sometimes. You will make decisions that don't pan out, calls that miss, choices you will look back on and revise. But the man who trusts himself makes those mistakes and learns from them, without using them as evidence that he should have asked for more, permission first. He recalibrates. He adjusts. He moves forward. Because forward is the only direction available to a man who has decided finally, firmly without conditions, that his own judgment is worth trusting. An unshakable identity is not built in a single moment of resolve. It is built the way everything real is built, slowly through repetition, through the accumulation of small acts of alignment between who you say you are and how you actually move through the world. Every time you hold a boundary without over-explaining it, 1 brick. Every time you make a decision and stand behind it without soliciting approval, 1 brick. Every time you sit in silence where your justification used to be and discover that you survive it, 1 brick. Every time you disappoint someone and carry it with compassion rather than collapse, 1 brick. Every time you withhold information from someone who would weaponize it, 1 brick. Every time you let your actions speak instead of rushing to narrate them, 1 brick. Individually, none of these moments feel like transformation. They feel small. Sometimes they feel like failure, especially in the beginning, when the guilt is fresh and the discomfort is unfamiliar and the old habits are pulling hard. But underneath the surface, something is being built that cannot be seen until it is finished. An identity that does not require external scaffolding to stand. A sense of self that is not dependent on how people respond to you, what they think of you, whether they approve of you, or whether they understand you. A foundation so deep and so solid that when the world pushes, and it will push, you do not scramble for words to defend yourself. You simply stand, not because you're immovable, not because you're close to growth or feedback or the genuine wisdom of people who know you well, but because you know who you are clearly enough that other people's uncertainty about you does not become your own. That is an unshakable identity, and it is available to any man willing to do the work. Not the work of becoming someone else, but the far more demanding work of becoming, fully and without apology, himself. I want you to hold a picture in your mind, not a fantasy, a direction. The man you are becoming doesn't walk into rooms looking for approval. He walks in carrying something, a quality, a stillness, a presence that people feel before he speaks. They can't always name it, but they register it. He listens more than he talks. When he does talk, people lean in, not because he performs authority, but because his words are scarce enough to be worth something. He makes decisions and acts on them. He doesn't announce them prematurely, seek consensus unnecessarily, or spend energy defending them to people who have no jurisdiction over them. He disappoints people sometimes. He is misunderstood occasionally. He is criticized, and he receives that criticism with enough openness to find what's useful in it and enough groundedness to release what isn't. He has people in his life who know him deeply, not because he told them everything, but because what he showed them was real, earned, given selectively, to people who demonstrated they deserved it. He is not perfect. He does not claim to be. He makes mistakes and owns them without theater, corrects them without drama, and moves forward without the kind of extended self-flagellation that is just another form of seeking sympathy. He is, in the fullest sense of the word, a man, not a performance of one, not a carefully managed image of one, the real thing, with all the weight, all the quiet, all the responsibility and freedom and dignity that come with it. We opened this entire journey with a question, disguised as an observation, but always a question. Why do so many men feel compelled to explain themselves, constantly, exhaustingly, to everyone? And we've arrived at the answer. Because somewhere along the way, they learned that their existence required justification, that their choices needed approval before they counted, that the gap between who they are and whether that's acceptable could only be bridged with enough words, enough transparency, enough explanation to make everyone comfortable. They learned to seek, in other people's understanding, the permission to be themselves. And we have spent 9 chapters, story by story, idea by idea, chapter by chapter, dismantling that belief. Not violently, not with contempt for the men who carry it, but with the steady, honest recognition that it was never true. You never needed permission, not for your decisions, not for your boundaries, not for your direction, not for your silence, not for the life you are building or the man you are becoming. You needed only one thing, the courage to stop asking. The strongest man is not the one who can explain himself to everyone. The strongest man is the one who no longer feels the need to. That man is not a myth. He is not reserved for the naturally confident, the undamaged, the ones who somehow avoided the conditioning the rest of us received. He is built, deliberately, quietly, one unexplained decision at a time. And he is who you are becoming. This video ends here, but the work doesn't. The work happens the next time someone challenges a decision you've already made, and you pause, and you choose to say less than you usually would. The work happens the next time you feel the pull toward justification, and you recognize it for what it is, and let it pass without following it. The work happens in the small moments, the text you don't over-explain, the boundaries you don't pad with apology, the silences you don't rush to fill. It happens in private, where no one is keeping score, where there is no audience for your growth except you. And it compounds, slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize that the man who used to rehearse justifications in his head before conversations that hadn't happened yet is gone. And in his place stands someone quieter, steadier, more himself than he has ever been. A man who needs no defense, because he finally became someone worth defending, and then realized he no longer needed to. If this video found you at the right moment, share it. Not for the views, for the man in your life who is exhausting himself explaining who he is to people who were never going to understand anyway. He needs to hear this.